So, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to introduce the founder and creator of Lovingly Audrey, and astrology and birth chart coach, Audrey Barnhardt. So, thank you so much for joining us, Audrey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. So, can you share with us how your entrepreneurial and spiritual journey began?
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, long story short, I think my entrepreneurial journey started when I was doing musical theater, where I learned that I was my own business. But what I didn't love was that I was my own business, but I couldn't control the business. And so that started making me, the wheels turn in my head. And after I went to my first big New York City audition, I was like, I don't feel like I helped anyone today. And
Yeah.
that felt very strange. I was like, am I only helping myself? Was I even being watched? I don't know. That felt very strange. And the wheels really started turning in that moment. And
Yeah.
I've always been into astrology and loved it. And that's kind of how I took a deep dive into astrology. But as for my business, that's super, super recent. It was like just taking a leap of faith, basically.
That's amazing. So you have a coaching and astrology business. And for those who don't know, can you share with us why and what makes you um, and your coaching different? And what inspired you to incorporate astrology into your coaching?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Adriana. That's what my parents named me.
Okay.
And my whole life, yes, my whole life, that's how I was known. And when I went to college, I went to Syracuse University. And when I started introducing myself there, I recognized that nobody understood my name. So I started going by Adri. And I love that nickname. It's very much so me. And so I wanted that to be a central part of my business, that like authentic, genuine self, which is why it's called Lovingly Adri. So that's just first and foremost the basis of my entire business has to do with this lovingly be yourself. And it's all about unconditionally loving yourself. And that comes through radical self-acceptance.
Yes, which
And
is so important.
yeah, extremely. And that changed my life. And so when I became a coach myself, that was my mentality. How do I help people see their genuine, authentic self and love themselves?
Yes.
And I've been in therapy for 10 years from the time I was 15 to 25. I've been, able to process and really look back in my life and see, okay, what was it that I needed at a certain time? And what kept coming back was I wish someone had done this before and told me what it was like. I wish there was someone that could tell me that this was normal.
Yes.
And all these feelings are normal. And when it all came down to it, I realized that with life coaching specifically, I am able to relate to people with my own life journey and experience. Whereas, like, say in therapy, you can't break that wall really as the therapist.
Yes.
And so, what makes me, I think, different from a lot of life coaches is that you're talking to a friend, like you're talking to your best friend, basically. I'm here to hype you up in all that you want to do, but I'm also here to challenge you lovingly. And my friends, have been my massive inspiration when it comes to this. So when it came to melding it with astrology, it was a no-brainer because astrology, your birth chart is a tool for self-awareness. And to radically accept yourself and to unconditionally love yourself, you have to have some self-awareness.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and so that's how I guess the long-winded story of how these two things like kind of came to be.
That's amazing. So you did touch on it a bit earlier, but prior to you starting your coaching business, you were in the theater. and performing arts. Um, so, at what moment did you decide to shift and change your career? Because obviously you said you'd gone and done auditions and you didn't feel like you were helping anybody, but for how long, or when did that whole transition from moving from the arts into what you're doing now?
Been a long journey. I've been doing musical theater since I was about 12 years old. I went to college for it, like I mentioned, and I graduated in 2018. But for my school, we moved to the city halfway through our senior year. So what the second I moved there, I basically like started auditioning and doing all that stuff. And you're always auditioning, like sending in tapes and
Yeah,
what
exactly. It's a constant ongoing process.
exactly. And I was, I had just finished my dream show, my dream role. I was playing Sophie in Mamma Mia. And
Oh,
at some
wow.
yeah, on the first day of college, actually, they had us all write down what our dream roles were. And that was my first one. I've always wanted to play that. So when I graduated and I booked that, I was like, this is the best. This is the best first show to do out of school. And I hated my life and I didn't know why. And I couldn't
Mm.
sleep. And I was doing like 2 show days on no sleep, no food, couldn't really talk to people backstage. I started recognizing that my stage fright wasn't stage fright, but panic attacks, honestly, full-blown panic attacks.
Yeah.
And I was on stage singing, I'm like, thank you for the music. You know what I mean? While on the inside, I'm like, I can't, like literally, it was awful. And so I started resenting the audience because they were having such a nice time, being like, oh, you put me so at ease. And I was like, that's so nice for you. And I would just, ruminate. And so when I came back to New York City, I was in an audition, and I'll say I was in an audition for Dear Evan Hansen, and I was standing in front of this person singing, and halfway through the song, I was like, that was it. That was the last one. That's done. And I left the room and I called one of my friends and who was on Broadway at the time, and I was like, that's the last one. And she was like, oh my gosh, okay. And
Mm.
so it was in that moment, that was in 2019 where I recognized in myself that I actually didn't love it. I
Yeah.
just do it. And that isn't a good enough reason to do something. You should probably love what you do. And I didn't know that. And so from there, I went into casting, absolutely loved it. The pandemic hit. That was awful. Lost all of that. Then I ended up moving to LA with my boyfriend, now husband. And it was here really where the true like work really started on what is it that I want to be doing. And I worked at a dispensary to make ends meet. I then, through that, met my future bosses who had a recruiting firm, did that for 2 years, and then felt like still something was missing. Like I wasn't helping enough. Like I just
Yes.
didn't useful enough. And I hated that my job stopped when I placed someone. I was like, no, but I want to know how your life is now. I want to like
Yeah.
reach your next goal. Like it's not about just getting this job. It's about being happy and like loving yourself and what now? And so I went to the dog park one day with my tiny dog Maisie. I ran into this girl and she changed my life when she told me about life coaching. At
Mm.
first, my own judgments came in where I was like, who calls themselves a life coach? You know what I mean?
Yes.
I was like, I can do life. I've done life. Meh, meh, meh. And once I looked into it, I was like, oh, like a life coach, they're not the expert on life. You are. You're the expert on your life. And
Yeah.
we're just here to help you be aware of the energies and what you're saying and really being a mirror to people. And I think I was put on this planet to be that mirror for people. And that's where we're at.
That's amazing. So, with that, what would you say some of your biggest career lessons have been? And you've probably had multiple, but is there one in particular that stands out for you?
Yes. There was a moment enacting where my family's from El Salvador, and I constantly, when I left Miami, had to convince people of that truth. And
Yes.
so I was like, do I change my last name to my mom's maiden name? Because my dad's last name is very German sounding. And so Adriana Shaps, everyone was like, what? So I was like, oh, Adriana Alvarez, that's my mom's maiden name. I'm going to do that. And so when I walked into an audition room and I said my name and I did the audition, they were like, why are you lying? And I was like, wait, what? And they were like, why are you putting on an accent? And I was like, for what language? Like, I'm not putting on an accent for any language. And I went home and I realized that fighting to be seen for who I was, that's not how I should be running who I am, if that
No.
makes any sense. And if I have to convince someone about me, about who I am, then honestly, that's not the business for me. And it didn't feel authentic to who I
Yeah.
was. And that was a big turning point in my career where it's all about showing up genuinely and authentically yourself. And that's it. And I felt that lesson was learned when I kept having to like fight it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into, I guess, the meat and potatoes, if you want to call it that, and
Mhm.
talk more about the readings and the birth charts. So if you can share with us a little bit more about this, and how it helps within coaching.
Absolutely. So, what I, like I said earlier, what I love about astrology, it's a massive tool for self-awareness.
Yeah.
And what astrology has on other methods for self-awareness is time. And the time, meaning there's speed in it. So in a 2 to 3 hour reading, you can gain a level of self-awareness that is only possible truly with either years of being in a very stable relationship with a very loving person or friend or whatever the case may be, or years of therapy.
Yes.
And I found that through getting my own chart read and finally understanding myself. I felt like I had never understood myself. I knew why I was the way I was, kind of, but I didn't understand why me, if that makes any sense. Like, why do I have these feelings? Why do I
Yes.
feel this way? Um, and astrology really answered the question of that for me. So once I started pairing birth chart readings into my coaching, well, all of a sudden my clients were forgiving themselves for things that they thought they never could, where they were like, oh, I inherently I was born with this perception of life. And what if I tried on another mentality? Or what if I tried on another sign's way of thinking of things?
Yes.
Um, we all have every single sign in our chart. There's 12
Yes.
signs, 12 houses. We all have one ruled by something. And so if there is a missing link in your life where you're like something's missing, this like spark or this mentality, like I guess I just don't have the drive, is what I've heard a lot of people say. Well, let's find a way to communicate what that drive actually means to you. Your drive won't be the same as somebody else's. Your ambition isn't the same as somebody else's. So when someone tells you, like, you have to do this and you have to be like this, well, no, that's their truth. They have to be like that. That's their rules. Let's
Yes.
figure out what are the rules that you were born with, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that being said, there's also a lot of misunderstanding or misconceptions about these modalities. So, can you please give us some insights and kind of dispel some of the perceptions around astrology and birth charting?
Yes, I love that question. So, we all have heard of astrology in the sense that, oh, this is either really good or really lucky or really bad and really unlucky. We call it like
Yes.
Getting that. So there are these astrologers that go around and they're like, well, you have Saturn in this house, so your life is terrible in this area.
Yeah.
That just isn't what astrology is at all. It's a very non-judgmental way of looking at a manual to your happiness, basically. So, what the birth chart really is, it's not a path towards enlightenment or self-actualization. It's a path towards the happiest life that you could live. It's
Yeah.
the difference between swimming upstream or swimming with it. Um, Knowing what kind of shoes to take on a hike. Do you take dancing shoes on a hike or hiking boots on a hike? That is what is being told in your birth chart. So there's nothing that's good or bad, it just is. So how do we use this to the best ability? How do we help this placement that some astrologers might call bad? How do we use that as a superpower for you and actually learn the lesson that that planet is teaching you?
Yeah.
And something that is not, I don't think many people know that aren't astrologers, is we're not reading the stars. We're reading the planets themselves. And it's not the stars aren't doing anything. The stars are being beautiful and just being there.
Yes.
But 10 planets, I include Pluto, absolutely. There's these planets and they all have their own energy and they're all based off of the human psyche. And so when Freud said ego, id, super ego, everyone was like, wow, revolutionary, life-changing. But when an astrologer is like, oh, Mercury, which rules the intellect of the human psyche, it's just a way of categorizing it. It's another way of
Yes.
saying it. So that's, I would say, a misconception where everyone thinks it's fortune telling or doomsday
Yeah.
telling.
Or look into the glass ball or something.
Yes, or like, who am I going to marry? Or like, when is this going to happen? How many kids am I supposed to have? That's not what I'm here to tell you. What I'm here to tell you is this is these are the inherent lenses that you were born with, and let's use those to the best of your abilities so that you can use your free will to make the best decisions possible, best choices for your life. And nobody else knows that other than you.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. So, being in the coaching space, what would you say makes you really different from others in the same or similar space? And can you give us any examples?
Yes, I would say that the difference with astrology and life coaching is that life coaching, it's all about listening. It's a lot of listening. It's a lot of
Yes.
silence on my end. When I'm doing like an astrology reading, I'm obviously talking a lot more. So there's a lot more like question and answering um in my practice, I would say more than other like coaches because remember, when we're coaching, you're the expert on your life. When I'm doing it with astrology, of course, like I know what I'm doing with astrology, but at the end of the day, where my practice kicks in is the now what. So what that means is like we've all had a moment where we've had a gross awakening of self-awareness, right?
Oh,
Be that
absolutely.
yeah,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, be that like talking to a friend or in therapy or even seeing like your mom act in a way that you act and then that makes you cringe a little bit and you're like, what do I do about this? I'm becoming my mother. Um, it's that it's
Yeah,
that
we
like
all have those moments for sure.
Exactly. So it's like, now what? I know this, now what? And that's what I'm really good at is the now what. So let's get really serious about, okay, you've been doing the same thing for years and years and years. You've been in the same cycle, the same pattern. Now what? Let's go. And being very, very honest. So, like I said, I differ from other life coaches because I view myself as more so like this professional best friend, I guess, where I am going to challenge you and I am going to hype you up and we're going to laugh and you might cry and I'll hold space for you. And but at the end of the day, it's fun. I love it. I want people to sit in their beds curled up under the covers while we talk. Like I want people to be doing whatever they want when it comes to comfort when we talk. It's not a sit down, let's be extremely really serious about this. No, life isn't like that. Life isn't
No.
like, and so I find the levity in the seriousness, and my clients really like that. And I love that for them because I know what it's like to be sitting on a couch across from someone and it feel really sterile.
Oh
And
yeah, and it's so clinical and so impersonal. And there's
yeah,
actually quite a bit of emotional detachment from, in those scenarios for the most part.
yeah, exactly. And we were taught getting my certification, to leave yourself out of it, leave yourself out of it, just like help them through. But I just think as humans, we feel so good when someone says, like, me too, I've gone through that as well. And telling a client that is, so heartbroken about a situation that they went through, if I can relate to that in any sort of way, and then say, all right, like, let's move, how do we move forward from this and forward this action, basically, use
Yeah.
these feelings to get us to the next step. Just that one moment of saying, like, girl, I've been through that too. Or like, oh my God, my best friend went through that too. Like, it's so hard.
Yeah, and it becomes relatable, right?
It becomes relatable. And now you don't view me as like, oh, this is my life coach, this is my astrological, this is my astrologer. Like, no, it's Adri, and you're talking to Adri, and that's you have me. So like I treat everyone the same that I've ever met. My best friends, I treat the same as I do someone I met like yesterday. It's just who I am, and so I'm really able to disarm people and break down those walls and make them feel special and seen. And that's just something I've always been able to do. So I was like, let me make a business out of this.
No, that's amazing. So
Thanks.
when you do the birth charts, which is obviously really comprehensive, can you share with us more about this, and what should someone who is looking to become a client of yours expect when going through this process?
So I've always been bilingual. My family, like I mentioned, is from El Salvador. So my first language was Spanish. I've always had to translate in my life forever. Be that like I had an American boyfriend that was trying to talk to family members, translating between the two. I had a family member that only spoke Spanish but understood English, so translating that for somebody else. Astrology is a language.
Yes.
It's reading symbols. And this is an old art form that has been lost, basically, this reading of symbols, right? Like people look at hieroglyphics and they're like, how does anybody understand what that is? Am the first one to be like, how do you read that? But once I started recognizing we basically have 34 symbols in the astrological language, and they can all be plugged in different ways. If you have the understanding of those basic 34 symbols, well, then what comes in is your intuition. That's when the like art form truly starts to thrive because my old astrologer, she would say astrology is a science, delineation is the art. It's the art of storytelling.
Yes.
And I, as an actor first, that was my whole thing. It was storytelling. I want to tell a story of this of anyone. And so what I started seeing in astrology was I started putting together a story of this person's life, but not just life, but like mental processes and psyches and different ways of looking at things and perspectives. And I started learning about myself through these people and how they viewed life and all of this. And so for people that want to be a client of mine or want to sign up for a reading, what they should expect is a very thorough, in depth, maybe too many details um, about how they could potentially be showing up in the world as their best self. And sure, there are parts of astrology that you have to share, this is going to be a little bit darker, or this might come up in this kind of way. And you have to be very careful with how you say it so that you don't turn into that astrologer that's like,
Yeah,
this.
exactly. There's
Um,
definitely sensitivities around it for sure.
for sure, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to tell you the truth, right?
Yeah, and
So
of course.
I guess my clients, when they're going around and like talking about me to other people, what I usually get is, "Oh, my friend told me that you read her for filth, so I want that too." And I'm like, "I don't read people for filth, the planets do."
Yeah.
Um, so I always say to people like, "This isn't me. This is what the planets are saying. This isn't me."
Yeah.
So it's if you're
So
ready
you
to
just the messenger.
the don't shoot the messenger, right?
Yeah.
And that's very much astrology's mindset is this is your information to have. I can just read the language, so I'm gonna translate it for you. And that's what I'm doing. And if you're someone that is ready to meet yourself in that kind of way and get to know yourself in that kind of way, if you want to like date yourself, basically, that's where you come to me. If you want to learn how to fall in love with yourself.
That's amazing.
Mm.
So, can you please expand upon your coaching beyond birth chart and astrology, and how your clients have really benefited? And can you give us any examples?
Yeah. So I created what I call ILSM. So I love you so much, which in my little lovingly Adri world means intuitively love yourself mentality. And that's something that I carry with me everywhere. I say ILSM to everyone when I leave a place. So I was like, oh, that's a perfect way to tie. I say it to my clients, I say it to everyone, ILSM. And so that's where that was really born out of, created. That mindset comes from radical self-acceptance that leads into unconditionally loving yourself. And my clients, I love my clients firstly. Like that's something that
Yes.
I didn't think I was going like I thought I when I got my clients or whatever, I'd be like, oh, this is a person and like they're it's gonna be nice, but like what the really I don't know, like I just wasn't expecting to really unconditionally love these people that I don't really know. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
yeah. And so when I started meeting them with this, radical acceptance, it made them really stop and think, right? Where all of a sudden there was someone in front of them that was like, my friends all call me a bitch. And I'm like, cool, why? What makes you a bitch? And
Yeah.
then they'll start talking and I'll be like, that doesn't sound like a bitch. That sounds like someone who knows what they want.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
you know, and then they started recognizing, okay, so who actually is in my court? Who does support me? Who does love me? And what I can share is that the majority of them then recognize they come in saying like, yeah, I love myself. I love myself. And it's always like that. Like, yeah, I love myself, of course. And
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, okay. And then when we keep talking, I'll be like, let's talk about that inner monologue that goes on in your head all day long. What's that tone like? And
Yes.
I'll be like, oh, well, it's really bitchy. And I'm like, so who's bitchy? Is it you or is it the voice? And
Yeah.
and then now we're recognizing the difference. And so then they're like, so the voice isn't me, right? Who is the self? Who's that person? And they start taking these deep dives into different mentalities and different mindsets and trying on things like a costume or like a wig or like putting on makeup and trying on a different role. And when they do that, they figure out like, oh my God, I've just been doing this the same way my whole life because that's how I was conditioned to. And I
Yes.
conditioned myself to do that. And no matter how old you are, you can learn something about yourself and grow and change. And growth doesn't come out of staying comfortable. Growth comes out of being uncomfortable. And I make uncomfortable situations extremely fun for some reason. Like that's just like what I like to do. Like I don't like to just sit and spiral. I mean, I do like to sit and spiral when I'm with my friends and I do and I'm just a friend. Yeah, I'll go down the rabbit hole for hours. But like when I'm wearing my coaching hat, that has to be nipped in the bud. So what's really cool is watching my clients my, I would say my greatest successes are when my clients stop their spiral themselves to then
Yes,
forward the action.
exactly.
It's really cool.
Well, that's amazing. So that leads me to the final question, which is what are the three key pieces of advice you would give to those looking to pursue a similar career or start their own business? And how would you like to be remembered, or what legacy would you like to leave?
Me like starts crying immediately at that question because it's so big. I love that question. I was when I think about this, I start thinking in ways of like what are the signs that are so intense that they have to, get after it or whatever? So, my first piece of advice would be like to think like a Scorpio. What does that mean? To think like a Scorpio, it's like one wrong move and the scorpion is going to sting you and you'll die, unfortunately. That's just what happens in nature. And so, how a Scorpio goes about life is if all of this were to be taken away tomorrow, how do I want to live this second? How do I want to live this existence right now?
Yes,
And so, when you take away time, when you take away limits and restrictions, and just say, like, this is actually done tomorrow, a lot of things start opening up in your mind and in your heart and in your world.
yes,
And so, if you're like, I want to do this, well, think about it. How badly do you want to do it? And that's, I'm not going to answer that question. And then number two is I would think like Capricorn. And Capricorns get really bad raps because they're really stubborn and all they want to do is achieve their goals. What is so bad about that? I'm a Libra, please. I'm not a Capricorn. They're scary. They're scary people. No, they're not. But I would say if you have a goal, go after that goal until you reach it and have the patience to sit in the uncomfortability that is building a business and starting out. And patience is the greatest thing you can learn, honestly,
yes,
fully. And then I would say, like, as my last piece of advice, if you feel like what you're doing, you're easily replaceable in, like, you're good at it, you can do it, but there's somebody down the street that could also learn how to do it as well, then let's start thinking about something that the world needs from you specifically. So if you weren't doing it, the world would be a worse place in a kind of way.
yeah,
So if this is what I want to do, but I'm scared, I don't want to take the leap, but I'm this, I'm that. All right, let's get rid of that but da 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 and just focus on the I am this. I'm not doing this. I'm not trying to do this. I
yeah.
am. And so that's the advice that I would give. And
Amazing. And then what legacy? How would you like to be remembered?
like a nice person, I just want everyone to love themselves. And so my favorite thing ever is when a client of mine tells me, so the other day I was spiraling and I was thinking about this and I thought to myself, like, if I was talking to Adri, what would she say back to me and what would I say to her? And when they tell me the realization they came to, I'm like, that's why I do this. Like, that is incredible. And there have been times on calls where I've had to really eat my tears and really just swallow them because my client will say to me, like, this has changed, just talking to you has changed my life. And in my head, I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting here telling you what I see here, hearing what you're saying, reflecting it back to you with zero judgment, just accepting you for who you are. And if anyone could, if I could leave this world and just one person is like, oh, Adri would be so proud of me in this.
Yeah, 100%. Amazing.
That's it.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining us today. So, if people want to connect with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
So my website is lovinglyadri.com. Very easy, very simple. That's the exact same for my Instagram. It's the same handle. So if you message me via Instagram, I'll definitely get back to you. If you find me on my website, there's a contact page there that you can reach out to me for. I'm launching ILYSM, the program, this upcoming week. So that's really exciting. It's already basically up, but the big launch, is coming. And yeah, it's very easy to get in touch with me, and I'll always answer.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining, and we definitely want to have you back in the future to see where you are in your journey. And
Yeah.
yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. This has been so fun.